The key was cold and heavy in Liam's palm, a tarnished brass skeleton that felt like it could unlock the past as easily as the warped front door before them. He glanced at Chloe, who was staring up at the facade of 42 Elmwood Avenue with an expression caught perfectly between horror and fascination. Her breath misted in the chill, late afternoon air, a tiny cloud of apprehension. "Well," she said, her voice unnaturally bright, "it has good bones." "You can see the bones," Liam replied, deadpan, "and some of the plumbing through that hole in the porch." It was an understatement. The house was a Victorian-era relic that had been neglected for decades. Peeling paint in a color that might have once been a cheerful yellow now resembled a jaundiced sigh. One shutter hung precariously by a single nail, swinging in the breeze with a forlorn creak. The garden was a jungle of thorny brambles and dead stalks, and the air smelled of damp earth and decay. Chloe, ever the optimist, nudged him with her elbow. "Come on, Grumpy. This is potential. This is our golden ticket." Their partnership was, on paper, a simple business arrangement. Best friends since a chaotic freshman year of college, they'd both stumbled into their 30s with a shared frustration: the impossibility of breaking into the city's brutal real estate market on their single incomes. Liam, a structured and pragmatic data analyst, had the spreadsheets. Chloe, a freelance graphic designer with a whirlwind energy, had the vision. Over a bottle of cheap wine, they conceived Project Equity. They would pool their savings, buy the worst house on a decent street, pour all their spare time and sweat into it for a year, flip it, split the profit, and finally have deposits for their own places. It was a perfect platonic plan. This house, 42 Elmwood, was the linchpin. It was the only thing they could afford that wasn't a literal teardown, and its location, just on the cusp of a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood, was ideal. Liam jiggled the key in the stubborn lock, finally shoving the door open with his shoulder. The smell that wafted out was a complex strata of history: old dust, mildew, the ghost of countless meals, and beneath it all, the sweet, melancholic scent of aged wood. They stepped inside onto grimy, cracked linoleum. The hallway was dark, the only light filtering through a grime-encrusted stained glass window above the door, casting colored shadows on the floor. To the left was a living room dominated by a fireplace choked with soot and debris. The wallpaper was a nightmare of faded, damp-spotted roses, peeling at the seams like dead skin. "Oh, wow," Chloe whispered, her designer's eye already seeing past the grime. "Look at the molding, Liam. The original crown molding. And the ceiling height." Liam was looking at the water stain on the ceiling that mapped a continent of neglect. "I'm looking at the structural integrity. I think that ceiling is holding on by a prayer and a cobweb." He was in his element, cataloging disasters. He pulled out his phone, opening a notes app with a pre-made checklist. Okay, immediate red flags: significant water damage in the living room ceiling, suspect floorboards near the fireplace, pervasive damp smell indicating possible subfloor rot. Chloe, meanwhile, had wandered into the center of the room and was spinning slowly, her arms outstretched. "We can tear down this wall. Open up the whole ground floor. This will be the kitchen diner, flowing right out to the garden. We'll have a huge farmhouse table right here." She pointed to a spot currently occupied by a mound of collapsed plaster. "And this fireplace, imagine it cleaned out with a reclaimed wood mantel. Candles, maybe some copper pots." Liam stopped typing and looked at her. In the dim light, with dust motes dancing around her like tiny fairies, she looked so utterly convinced, so full of faith in this crumbling wreck, that his own cynicism faltered for a moment. He saw not the water stain, but the potential for the light she described. It was a dangerous shift in perspective. "First," he said, his voice softer than he intended, "we need to see if the floors will hold that farmhouse table." The tour continued. A kitchen with avocado green appliances and cabinets that smelled of rancid grease, a bathroom with a pink-tiled shower that looked like a crime scene, and 3 bedrooms upstairs, each with sloping floors and windows painted shut. But in the smallest bedroom, at the back of the house, Chloe found a small, water-damaged box. Inside were a few black and white photographs. A young couple on their wedding day, a child playing with a dog in the garden that was now a bramble patch. She held one up to the light. Look, they were happy here once. Liam came to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. He looked at the photograph, at the smiling faces of people long gone, and then at Chloe's profile, lit by the weak afternoon sun. The house was no longer just a financial equation. It was a story, interrupted, and they were about to become the next chapter. The first week was demolition. It was brutal, cathartic, and filthy. They worked every night after their day jobs and all weekend, armed with crowbars, sledgehammers, and an industrial-sized dumpster parked on the front lawn. Liam attacked the task with systematic precision. He was methodical, labeling wires before he cut them, carefully prying away baseboards to be reused, wearing a respirator and safety goggles like a uniform. Chloe was a force of nature. She swung a sledgehammer with a ferocious joy, reducing the Nightmare Rose wallpaper and the lathe plaster walls to clouds of dust and piles of rubble. Her laughter echoed through the empty rooms, a sound brighter than anything the house had known in years. "This is therapy," she yelled over the crash of falling plaster, her face smudged with dirt, hair escaping from its messy bun. "Cheaper than a shrink." Liam couldn't help but smile. "My therapist never gave me blisters like this," he called back, flexing his aching hands. They fell into a rhythm. He was the planner, the brain. She was the motivator, the heart. He would identify a load-bearing wall and outline the safe way to open it up. She would then infuse the plan with a vision of light and space that kept him going when the dust and the doubt threatened to choke him. One Saturday, they were tackling the kitchen. Chloe was ripping out the vile green cabinets, while Liam worked on disconnecting the ancient sink. "I had another fight with Mark today," she said conversationally, heaving a cabinet door into the dumpster pile. Her voice was slightly strained. Liam paused, pipe wrench in hand. Mark was her on-again, off-again boyfriend, a slick commercial real estate agent who thought project equity was a quaint and risky folly. "What about?" "The usual. He thinks I'm wasting my weekends, that I smell like sawdust and sweat. He suggested we get a proper contractor and go to the Maldives instead." She sighed, a cloud of dust puffing from her hair. "He doesn't get it. He doesn't get why this is important." Liam looked at her, really looked. He saw the tiredness around her eyes, the set of her jaw that wasn't just from physical exertion. "This is important," he said simply. "You're building your future, not his version of it." Her eyes met his, and a silent, understanding passed between them, as clear and solid as the studs they'd exposed in the walls. In this house, they were a team, a unit. It was them against the dry rot, the faulty wiring, and the outside world's expectations. Later that evening, exhausted and covered in a fine layer of grime, they sat on the bare subfloor of the living room, leaning against the newly exposed brick of the fireplace. They shared a pizza, the box open between them, and a bottle of cheap red wine drank from paper cups. The setting sun streamed through the now bare windows, painting the raw, skeletal room in shades of gold and orange. The chaos of demolition was all around them, but in that moment, it felt peaceful, hopeful. "We're really doing this, aren't we?" Chloe said softly, her head leaning back against the brick. "We are," Liam said, taking a sip of wine. He watched the light catch the dust still floating in the air, making it look like glitter. He looked at Chloe, her face relaxed and peaceful in the warm light. The familiar fondness he felt for his best friend was shifting, deepening into something warmer, something more profound. It was a feeling as solid and real as the floor beneath them, and it terrified him. This wasn't part of the spreadsheet. As autumn deepened, the house began to transform from a shell into a structure. The new plumbing and wiring were in, snaking through the walls like a new nervous system. The drywall was up, turning the chaotic open spaces into defined rooms again, pristine and waiting. This was Liam's favorite part. The math of it, measuring twice, cutting once. The satisfying click of a dovetail joint in the custom bookshelves he was building for the living room nook. He found a quiet joy in the creation, in the act of making something beautiful and functional from raw materials. It was also the period of their first real fight. Chloe had chosen the kitchen tiles, a beautiful hand-painted Italian tile with an intricate floral pattern. They were expensive, blowing a significant hole in their carefully calculated budget. Chloe, we agreed, Liam said, his voice tight as he held the invoice. Mid-range, durable, neutral. This is art. It's not in the budget. Her face fell. But it's the heart of the home, Liam. It needs a soul. These neutral tiles you picked look like they belong in a hospital morgue. They look like they belong in a budget that allows us to actually make a profit, he retorted, frustration boiling over. He was tired. He'd been up until 2 a.m. the night before, fixing a mistake in the wiring he'd traced back to a rushed decision she'd pushed for. This isn't your forever home, remember? This is project equity. We're not building a dream home. We're building a product. The moment the words left his mouth, he knew they were wrong. He saw her flinch as if he'd struck her. The light in her eyes, the same light that had seen potential in the rotting porch, went out. A product, she repeated flatly. Right, I forgot. It's all just numbers on your spreadsheet to you, isn't it? She turned and walked out of the room, leaving him standing in the middle of the unfinished kitchen, surrounded by the beautiful, budget-busting tiles. The house felt suddenly cold and empty, the silence louder than any sledgehammer. They worked in silence for the rest of the weekend. The easy camaraderie was gone, replaced by a stiff, polite distance. It was agony. The house felt wrong without her laughter in it. Her vision was what gave it life. His spreadsheets just gave it structure. Without her, it was just a building site. On Sunday evening, he found her sitting on the back steps, looking out at the garden they hadn't yet had time to tame. He sat down beside her, the space between them charged and uncomfortable. I'm sorry, he said, the words feeling inadequate. I didn't mean it. It's not just a product. She didn't look at him, just hugged her knees. It feels like it sometimes, Liam. You get so focused on the cost, the timeline, the resale value, that you forget why we started this. We started this to create something. Together. I know, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's just my job is to manage the risk, to make sure we don't lose everything. And sometimes your boundless optimism scares the hell out of me. Finally, she turned to him, her eyes glistening. And your relentless pragmatism breaks my heart sometimes. Because this house, it's more than investment to me now. And I think it might be too. The air left his lungs. The unspoken thing that had been growing between them, nurtured by shared sweat and pizza and sunset, was now out in the open, fragile and terrifying. He reached out, his calloused, work-roughened hand covering hers. It's more than investment to me, too, Chloe. All of it. It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was enough. The tension melted away, replaced by something new and tender. He kept his hand on hers, and they sat there in the gathering dusk, watching the first stars appear over the skeleton of their garden. The crisis had passed, but had changed the blueprint of their relationship forever. The winter was harsh, but inside 42 Elmwood, a different kind of storm was brewing. The fight had been a turning point, breaking down the last platonic barrier between them. The casual touches lingered. The glances held more weight. The air in the house was thick with unsaid words and a delicious, terrifying tension. They were staining the floorboards, working on their hands and knees, moving towards each other from opposite sides of the vast living room. The rich, honeyed scent of the polyurethane filled the air. Their progress was slow, meticulous, the soft swish of their applicators the only sound. Liam looked up and saw Chloe watching him, a small, soft smile on her face. A smudge of stain was on her cheek. He felt a jolt, a visceral pull that had nothing to do with friendship and everything to do with a woman kneeling in the golden light, helping him build a home. She reached the center of the room just as he did. They stopped, kneeling face to face, surrounded by the gleaming, newly finished floor. You have a little, he murmured, his voice husky. He reached out, his thumb gently wiping the stain from her cheek. His touch lingered, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. Chloe's breath hitched. Her eyes, wide and impossibly green, searched his. The world narrowed to this single point in space and time. The center of the room, the smell of fresh wood, the feel of her skin under his hand. "Liam," she whispered, a question and an answer in one syllable. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. She met him halfway. The kiss was not gentle. It was weeks of suppressed longing, of shared struggles and quiet admiration, all exploding into one perfect, desperate connection. It tasted of sawdust and hope and the cheap coffee they'd been drinking all morning. His hands came up to cradle her face, careful despite their roughness. Her fingers tangled in the fabric of his dusty t-shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. The house, for the first time, was completely silent, as if holding its breath with them. "Wow," Chloe breathed, her forehead resting against his. "I know," Liam replied, his heart hammering against his ribs. The spreadsheet was gone. The business plan was ash. All that remained was her, in his arms, in the heart of the home they had built together. From that day on, everything changed. The night shifts became their sanctuary. They'd work until their bodies ached, and then they'd make love on a pile of drop cloths in front of the now-functioning fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls they had stripped bare and made new. They shared secrets in the dark that they'd never told anyone else. Their deepest fears, their most foolish dreams. The house was no longer just a project. It was their cocoon, a secret world where their love could grow, hidden from the expectations of their friends, their families, and especially from Mark. It was perfect, it was fragile, and it was about to be tested. The first crack appeared on a bright, cold Saturday in early spring. The house was nearly finished. The kitchen, with its beautiful, budget-approved compromise tiles, was installed. The bathroom gleamed with new fixtures. The garden had been cleared, and a fresh lawn was beginning to sprout. Chloe's phone buzzed insistently on the new countertop. She ignored it, focusing on caulking the edge of the farmhouse sink. "Aren't you going to get that?" Liam asked, tightening the handle on a cabinet door. "It's just Mark," she said a little too quickly. "He's been persistent." The phone stopped, then started again immediately. With a sigh of exasperation, she wiped her hands and answered. "Hi, Mark." Liam tried not to listen, but the room was quiet. "No, I'm at the house." "I know, but I told you I'm busy because it's important to me." Her voice was rising. She walked into the hallway, but Liam could still hear. "What do you mean, an intervention? You spoke to my mother." Liam's blood ran cold. Chloe's voice became sharp. "My financial decisions are my own, and my relationship with Liam is none of your business. It's not just a business arrangement. Not anymore." "What?" "No, I'm not going to say it over the phone. We need to talk. In person." "Fine. Tonight. Bye." She ended the call and came back into the kitchen, her face pale and drawn. "Chloe," Liam said gently. "He knows," she said, her voice trembling. "Or he suspects. He said our little renovation project has become an obsession and that Liam is taking advantage of the situation." She wrapped her arms around herself. "My mom thinks I'm having a breakdown. She thinks I poured too much money and too much of myself into this." The outside world had crashed into their sanctuary, and it was uglier than they had imagined. That night, she went to meet Mark. Liam stayed at the house, pacing the finished floors, his anxiety a physical presence in the room. This was the variable his spreadsheet could never have accounted for: the human heart. She came back 2 hours later. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her jaw was set with a new determination. "It's over," she said simply, walking into his open arms. "For good this time." He held her tightly, relief flooding through him. "What happened?" "He gave me an ultimatum. Him or the house. Him or you." She looked up at him, her gaze clear and steady. "It was the easiest decision I've ever made." For a week, they existed in a bubble of renewed happiness. The threat had been faced and vanquished. They started talking about the future in a new way. Not about selling, but about staying. What if they didn't flip it? What if this was their forever home? Then the second, more devastating crack appeared. Liam was laid off. It came without warning on a Tuesday morning. A brief, brutal meeting with HR, a severance package, and a security escort to the door. The tech sector was contracting, and his department was deemed redundant. He drove to Elmwood in a daze. He sat in his car in the driveway for a long time, just staring at the house. It was perfect now. The fresh coat of pale gray paint, the black shutters, the new porch light casting a warm glow in the twilight. It was everything they had dreamed of, and he had just lost his ability to pay for half of it. He found Chloe inside, hanging curtains in the master bedroom. She took one look at his face and knew. When he told her, the silence that followed was heavier than any they had ever shared. The financial reality was a cold, hard slap. The mortgage was in both their names. The profit from a sale was supposed to set them up for their independent futures. Now, his future was uncertain. He had savings, but they wouldn't last long. "We'll figure it out," Chloe said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. The fear was back in her eyes. The pressure began to build again, different this time. It wasn't about clashing styles or budgets. It was about survival. Liam threw himself into a frantic job search, but the market was tough. Interviews were scarce. With every rejection, he grew more withdrawn, more convinced he was failing her. One evening, the dam broke. They were discussing the final touches, the staging for the upcoming open house. The realtor wanted on the market by the end of the month. "We can't stay, Liam," Chloe said softly, arranging a throw pillow on the sofa. "We have to sell. You know we do." He was staring out the window, his back to her. "I know." His voice was hollow. "It's just a house," she said, trying to sound brave, trying to echo his old words back to him. But her voice cracked. He turned around, his face a mask of anguish. "Is it, Chloe? Is it just a house? Because it doesn't feel like it anymore. It feels like I built this for us, for our future, and now I have to sell it because I failed." "You didn't fail," she cried, walking towards him. "I did. The whole point of this was financial security, and I've jeopardized it. How can you even look at me right now?" "Stop it," she shouted, tears finally streaming down her face. "Stop reducing everything to a balance sheet. You lost a job, Liam. You didn't fail as a person. We built this together. And we will get through this together. But if you think for 1 second that this house, this product, is more important to me than you are, then you never understood what we built here at all." She grabbed her coat and fled, the slam of the front door echoing through the beautiful, empty rooms like a gunshot. Liam stood alone in the perfect living room, surrounded by the ghost of every laugh, every argument, every kiss. He looked at the bookshelves he had built, the fireplace she had envisioned, the floor they had stained together. She was right. He had been so focused on providing, on being the rock, that he had forgotten the foundation they had built wasn't made of wood and concrete, but of trust and partnership. He had let his fear dismantle it in a single evening. He had to fix it. He had to find a way. He found her an hour later, sitting on the swings in the park at the end of Elmwood Avenue. Her shoulders were slumped, and she was shivering in the cold night air. He sat on the swing next to hers, the chains groaning softly. For a long moment, they just swung in silence, the way they had as kids, back when the future was a simple, distant dream. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw. "You're right. About everything. I got so scared of not being enough for you that I forgot I already was. We built a home, Chloe, the first real home I've ever had. And it's not these walls. It's you. It's always been you." She stopped swinging and looked at him, her face illuminated by the distant streetlight. "I don't have a new job yet," he continued. "I don't know how we'll manage the mortgage. But I know I don't want to do it without you. And I don't want to sell. This is our home. We'll rent out a room if we have to. I'll get a job bartending. I don't care. We'll make it work. Together." Chloe reached out, her cold fingers intertwining with his. "Together," she whispered. He pulled a small, folded piece of paper from his pocket. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was the black and white photograph she had found on their first day of the happy couple in the garden. He had salvaged it and kept it safe. I want this to be us, Chloe. Not just in a photograph, but for real. I don't have a ring. I have a house and a heart that you rebuilt right alongside it. Will you stay? Not just in the house. With me. Forever. It wasn't a traditional proposal. It was better. It was theirs. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of joy. She launched herself from the swing and into his arms, nearly knocking them both over. Yes, she whispered against his lips between kisses. Yes, of course, yes. 6 months later, the garden at 42 Elmwood was in full bloom. Lavender and rosemary spilled over the stone path Chloe had laid herself. A string of fairy lights was woven through the pergola Liam had built over a new flagstone patio. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the warm summer air. It was their housewarming party and their engagement party. They had never ended up putting the house on the market. Liam, freed from the pressure, had found a better job, one that valued his meticulous nature. They had taken a risk, and it had paid off in ways the original spreadsheet could never have calculated. As their friends and family milled about, admiring the transformation, Liam slipped his arm around Chloe's waist, pulling her close. She leaned her head on his shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "We did good, Grumpy," she said, looking out at their home, filled with light and life and love. He kissed her temple, breathing in the scent of her hair, a scent that was now permanently mingled with the smell of fresh paint and lemon polish. "No," he murmured, his voice full of a certainty that had taken a broken house to find. "We did great." They had come to restore a house for a financial future. But side by side, with every swing of the hammer and every stroke of the brush, they had uncovered something far more valuable, the blueprint for a love that was built to last.